before we start our questions, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Hornstein, for taking the time to chat with us this evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us tonight for PFP's interactive chat, where we're going to talk about stress reduction for parents. And I'm going to do a quick introduction before we begin. My name is Lori Keslowitz. I live in South Philly. I live with my wife and our 16-month-old child. This is my second year with PFP, or Philadelphia Family Pride. For those of you who don't know us, Philadelphia Family Pride is a nonprofit membership organization for LGBTQ+ led families in the greater Philadelphia region. And we create opportunities to build community through education, advocacy, and social events for LGBTQ+ parents, prospective parents, grandparents, and all of our children. So tonight, we're going to talk with Dr. Robin Hornstein, who was a founding member of PFP, and she owns an LGBTQ+ practice. She is a health coach, and she specializes in eating disorders. She has been practicing for 38 years, and she has 2 children. One is 25 and the other is 17, and she has 2 pets, a 19-year-old cat and a 4.5-year-old puppy. And you can find her on Instagram at Robin Mindful Counseling, or on her website, www.hptherapy.com. So we're going to jump right into it. We have some questions that we're going to ask tonight, and we're going to get some answers from Dr. Hornstein. Our first question is a 2-part question. It says, how do you talk to your kids about their donor? When should you reveal information about them? For example, pictures, bios, that he has ID consent. So at 18, the children can get to know his last name, his contact information, and any bio siblings.
Wow. Well, first of all, please call me Robin. And secondly, that's a really huge question. And I think I have a couple of thoughts about that. The first is, because I don't know who asked the question and how old the child is, I don't want to just jump into making an assumption, right? So if you just had a baby and you're thinking, when do I introduce it? I'd say the minute you start using language, that's just part of your family's system. You can have all kinds of conversations that, you have a donor and these are your moms or these are your dads, or, whomever is raising the child, could be single mom, single dad. So I think the deal really is you do it by developmental milestone for the child. So if you're always talking about it, the kid's always used to it, that's just part of how life works. If you have an older child that you haven't said something to at this point for different reasons, and people, different, at times have their own reasons for why they might have delayed or not said something in the beginning, I think you have open conversations. You start to just say, hey, you know what? And usually this happens because a 5 or 6 or 7-year-old says, why don't I have, the kind of family other people have, or a dad or something? And, despite all of the things we as queer gay parents do, and we talk about it all the time and we think we've said everything, they always come up with a question. We're like, how did I not think of that? That seems like we talk about everything. And I think you just answer the question honestly, depending on their age. And at some point, I think the harder question is, when do you introduce the fact that there's this person that is available to be met at 18 without either scaring the child that they're going to be taken away. If they're really young, they'll think, oh my God, do I have to go live with them? Or you have to be so sensitive to what if that's all they focus on then, and they're like, well, I want to know the person now. And I'm not saying this is a threat to who you are, but more as what's the curiosity going to be for the child, right? And I think you answer the questions that are asked, and you begin to introduce more as you think the child is understanding that our family is our family, and this is a person who is amazing and is part of who we are. Because of him, you exist. And when you're 18, you'll decide if you want to, talk to this person, meet him, know him or not, right? That'll be optional.
Right, I love that. That sounds great. Our second question is, do you believe that behaviors will go back to where they were after the quarantine is over?
He's throwing some good questions here. So, the answer to that starts back in your life. I think we need to all take a step back and think about something that we've lived through that has been hard or has changed us. And I think we need to say to ourselves, was I the same exact person before, during, and after? And I think the answer is yes and no. I think the yes part is we have consistent personalities, we have consistent styles, we have consistent ways of being in the world, interests of things, things we like to do or things we don't like. I will not, when this is over, like persimmons. I didn't like them before. I will not like them later. And that's, silly. But the reality is, will our behaviors, will our children go back to the same? I think same is probably too loaded because we really are going through something that is changing us. It has changed how our family dynamic is working. It has changed how we are in the world. It has changed how we are with extended family. It has changed how we are with friends, how we are in the market, the playground. And I think you can't help. And if you're anxious, and if you're not anxious, you're sleeping through this whole thing. But if you have some degree of anxiety about this, your kids are picking that up. And will they go back to being a fun-loving kid who loves to climb as high as they can at the playground? Most likely, yes. Will they be exactly the same or kind of curious, will this ever happen again? If you lose somebody that they know, there will be some grief affiliated with this time period. So I think we just need to be gentle with ourselves and our kids as we walk through this, and know that if part of that question, as a mom, I'm kind of thinking about that question a little bit more. If part of that question is, my child is suddenly pretty reclusive, or my child is acting out in ways that he, she, they never did before, I think at that point, I would say, will they go back to being more cheerful or less angry? Or probably yes. And if not, as a therapist, obviously I'm a psychologist, I would say that would be a good time to go dig deeper as a family or get some therapy. So, yeah.
Right. And how can we find alone time and partner time balance when we are working from home and simultaneously parenting all at the same time?
I'm laughing because that is the $1 million question everybody's asking, and I work with a lot of parents. So the truth of the matter is, we're tired as adults, right? We're tired. And if we're working from home or we're suddenly not working, but the person we live with, our partner, our spouse, our wife, husband, they're working, all the dynamics are shifting. Our kids are not in daycare, or they're not at school. And finding, I don't know, but when I remember back to my daughter being younger, it was hard enough to find time then, and there was no pandemic. It was hard enough when she was really little to be like, we just feel like having alone time. So could you just go to sleep early, or, excuse me, do something that makes our life easier? But you can't even get a babysitter now easily, right? So I think part of it is, depending on the kid's age, you could say we're going to have some kid time and some parent time at the same time, when it's a good time for them to chill out a little bit. If they're old enough to just sort of watch their favorite show together, or to play a game, or they get iPad special time, whatever it is they get. If you're willing, you could wait till they fall asleep, or you could set an alarm for the middle of the night, or you could wake up early. Sleep has been a precious commodity for people during this. I know a lot of people report having sleep issues, so I'm not highly recommending doing that every night or all the time, but maybe it's worth waking up, going to bed when they go to bed super early, and then getting up around 2 in the morning and having a little bit of alone time, whether it's a cuddle or a TV show or sex. Whatever it is that you have a desire to do at that point. Also, if your kids have elevated the time they're knocking on the door, right? They want to see you all the time. I know we have a child therapist who did talk about setting up with younger kids, setting up a system of red, yellow, and green. So when you put up this like a red piece of paper, or they make you a picture in red, that means don't talk to me right now unless there's an emergency, and you define emergency. Yellow means approach cautiously, and green means wide open, come on in, let's talk, hug, play, you want a snack, whatever it is. Some kids will take to that. Some kids will be like, yeah, okay, whatever. So I think part of it is being as creative as you can. And also the hardest thing for me is to remind myself, this really is going to pass. Like, this is not how our life is permanently. It's how our life is in this moment, and practicing, having like maybe a mindfulness practice of like, it's just, this is the moment, and it's this moment and that moment. And yes, it's the 55th time you've been interrupted from one thought because your kids are fighting, or they need, Cheez-Its, or, some, goldfish or something like that. It's hard. It's hard to remember that life will open up again, and it will be back to a much more robust place in not that long. I mean, I'm not saying tomorrow, but it will go back.
How about any advice you have for someone's partner who is not open to compromise or ideas besides their own?
Yeah. Okay. So that's an interesting question. Not open to compromise. So the first question I probably would say to you is this new? Like, anything that's happening right now, if it's a new behavior that was never in your relationship before, I might chalk some of it up to anxiety, and to change in schedule. If this is the way it's always been, I don't know how you would expect it to be different, right? Because that's going to be the way the person's style is. And at that point, I would say there's plenty of at-home sort of remedies, right? There's something called the Gottman, Gottman card deck, which Gottman and company did. They're out in Seattle. They've done a ton of research on couples, including families like ours. And so they have these free decks on, like, you open the App Store and you put in Gottman card deck, and there you can literally download this and start to play with the questions, because you want to go back to how you fell in love and what the story was about. When someone comes in for couples therapy, the last question we ask first is, so why is everything so bad now? That's not a very helpful question. Some couples therapists may think that differently than I think about that. But the reality is, we have to go back and remember, why do we like this person? Why do we love this person? What did we admire about them? And if you start to have questions, and the Gottman card deck sort of reminds you some of those questions, it's almost like getting to know each other again. And then the other thing is, if somebody is not compromising with you, and relationships are compromise. Anyone who tells you that they're sunny and everybody agrees all the time and everything's perfect and we always believe in the same thing, the same day at the same time, I want to see that relationship in action, because really it's about compromise. And if you're feeling like you are in a relationship where there is no compromise right now, that's something you need to actually articulate. And that's a hard thing to do, but to be able to say, listen, I have been trying to tell you how I feel, and I really have a strong feeling about this. You have a strong feeling about this. Where is the middle? Like, where do we find it? How do we find it? So I hope that answers that question.
Our next question is somewhat related. It's kind of long. Here it goes. I'm in a married, committed, faithful, happy relationship with my spouse, but the 24/7 proximity to family is sometimes wearing. I noticed I am attracted to other people, one in particular. Is it possible to feel both satisfied with your current relationship and family structure while longing for new sexual experiences with someone else? Where do I go from here? And what do I do if these feelings do not pass? I don't want to lose what I have, but I also want to be true to myself.
Wow, that is a really good question, and you're right, it was a long question, but I think I followed along pretty well. Can I just say, I'm going to just start with the one thing I really have been saying to everybody, including myself. Now is not the time to make a significant change unless you are absolutely so miserable or in danger or so unhappy that you can't stand what's happening. I don't hear that in this story. What I hear is, first of all, I have an attraction to someone else. Join the human race. There is no partner you will ever have in your life that will be the only person you're attracted to. If that happens, that's amazing, I guess, if that's your goal. But I think part of what we do to juice up our relationships is have kind of feelings about other people or curiosity. It's why people have a sex list of celebrities they're allowed to sleep with, as if the celebrities were like, yeah, that's great, good, I'm glad I'm on your list. But reality speaking, we have these lists because we kind of think about other people. It's part of being sexual and alive and aware, and it doesn't stop at a certain point like, oh, now we got married and now it never happens again. However, I would say ask yourself some questions. Can you not do anything about it and just sit with it through this so as not to make any decisions, big decisions, or start to rock a boat that you're not sure you want to rock? Number one. Number two, is there somebody you can talk to about it? Because then you could kind of flesh out a little bit more. Is this thing really a real feeling that I need to want to consider acting on? Relationships change. Relationships can change. They can go from, monogamous to polyamorous. People make some decisions all the time. And I think the person you most want to talk to, if the feeling continues to kind of dig at you, is the person you're happy with and love and are with, right? So ultimately, if it's not just a sort of passing, fleeting thought like in your head, maybe you say, I want to talk to him, I'm having this weird feeling, because you may find out what you might hear from your partner. Yeah, I actually had that same thought. Or, oh, that's really upsetting and I don't think I can handle it right now. Can we talk about it after the pandemic? I mean, you actually, could decide to, take some time to like process it through as a couple, and kind of, you might find yourself falling in love all over again and this feeling goes away, or it may not. And then the true to yourself statement, which it sounds like you have a lot of things to be true to yourself about, right? You're happy in this relationship, you like it for your kids and your family. If the true to yourself means something has to change, I think you just have to include your partner in what's going on.
Sounds good. We have another question. This one is about anxiety. What are some effective ways to move through anxiety when you're actively caring for young children and you're not able to walk away from the situation?
Yeah. So the first thing is, if you have young children and you're anxious, not only do they feel it, but you want to be you're the model, right? You're the model of what we do. And since they're not seeing a whole lot of other models, you find things to do. So maybe you need a little me time, and maybe you do have an aunt or an uncle or a grandparent that is willing to do story time with your child, even if you need them on, even if they're so young, they need to be sitting on your lap, and you can be doing some deep breathing and the child is focused, right? There are great meditations and things you can do with kids. You can do walking meditations with kids, and you can do singing, and you can do chanting and things like that, because I think that helps with anxiety. I hope that you'd be talking to your partner about all the things you're anxious about. And if you're sharing the same exact things, also talk to a friend who may be having a different feeling. There are some apps that are really useful and helpful let me just run down some apps on the top of my head. There's the Sleep With Me app if you're not sleeping, because let me just say, if you don't sleep, anxiety gets worse. There's the Woebot, that's WOEBOT, which is a cognitive behavioral app that talks to you and asks you questions, and also has, it really kind of digs into irrational thoughts that we all kind of have and handle. You could decide, to see a therapist. You could decide to go on medication. Everybody's working online if the anxiety is that bad. I also wonder how much pressure you're bringing on yourself. And I'm not saying you're bringing on the anxiety. I'm just saying you're bringing on, I have to be this parent that gets all the food on the table, and I have to clean the place, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. And if there's a list of things you have to do and you're not accomplishing them, you're going to inflate your anxiety. Some people do really well with increased exercise, being outside, taking walks in the sun, sitting in the sun, reading books. I will share that not a stranger to anxiety myself. I think most people are not. I have found that when I have those moments, and it happened at the beginning of this quarantine time, I started reading the books I loved as a kid, and I got to regress a little bit. And the regression actually made me feel really comfortable. Like I reread Alice in Wonderland, and I reread Little Women, and it's sexist and all that other stuff, although the new movie isn't. But I think anxiety needs to be addressed, and you need the support. And I think reaching out and not trying to manage it yourself is really important. And it's so interesting. I have friends all over the country, and so I talk at different times, and I'm old enough. I'm so old, I like to use the phone. And I'll call my friend in California, and she'll be like, this has been such a hard day. And it may not have been my hard day, and I'm able to hear hers and hold it for her for a while. And we take turns kind of sharing that back and forth. So I think that's what I would do with anxiety right now.
That's very helpful. I appreciated all of that. Our next question is, how do I balance my child's screen time when both learning and socializing is online? Should I try to limit it or just monitor the content, but put less emphasis on the time constraints?
Right. So the first thing I'll say is these are blue light glasses, and I'm loving them. And if your child or you are on the screen a lot, you want to stop some of that stimulation that comes from the screen. Even they make them in kids. I don't know why I bought the biggest pair in the world, but they make them for kids. So that's just one little tip. It's impossible if your child is a school-age child and has friends that they are not able to see right now, and family, to say you can only use the screen for this, and then not the thing that might feel a little more rewarding than school online, which might be like a TV show. I think the answer is always balance. Balance is my favorite word in life, I think. I have to admit, my daughter had 30 minutes of screen time for years. That's it, a day. And to this day, she tells me it's my fault that she's turned into somebody who really likes to watch reality TV. So I'm just going to have to live with that the rest of my life. But I think you almost want to schedule it. I think kids do really, really well with schedules. So why not make it about schedules? Like, you have this much time, you can play your games, you can do whatever. Here's school time, here's this other time, but here's time we're going to go outside and dig in the garden. Here's time we're going to, take a walk. Here's time we're going to do something crazy like draw pictures and send them to your grandmom so you can't see right now. You make sure that you have some balance. Involve kids in everything, gardening, cooking, I'll say this, and I know it's never always the easiest thing. Cleaning up, cleaning up. I will tell you, my favorite activity when I was raising my oldest daughter is, she loved to clean if it was in service of a game. And so what I would do is I'd gather all the toys all over the house, and I'd put them in one space, and we learned about money this way too. I would have some money, and I'd go to the store, and she'd be the salesperson. And then we'd take turns, and I would buy one of the toys, and I'd say, "Oh, thank you so much." And I'd leave, and I'd put it exactly where I wanted it. Then we reversed it, and I'd be selling to her, and we'd have to make change and all that other stuff. And then she would go and put it where it belonged. And by the time we were finished, this like maybe 40-minute game, everything was picked up, everything was cleaned. And then we counted the money, and she kept the pile she earned from being the salesperson. And then I would get so excited she cleaned everything up, I would give her my pile. And usually it came to like a couple dollars. I think the more we involve them in activities that are not just screen, we should let ourselves off the hook about being guilty that they're on the screens, because that's our life. These are our lifeline. I'm talking to you on a screen right now. So it's hard to kind of just cut them off unless you see them being lost in it. And if you have teenagers, I didn't address that yet, but let me just say, with a teenager, if you start noticing, like, yes, their sleep patterns are probably really off. They're probably going to bed between 12 and 3. They're probably sleeping a little late. They're just making it to their online class, which starts at 10, whatever is happening there. But if you notice them getting depressed, I think that's when you say, let's have a talk about this. Let's talk about what's going on and where are you? And show me your computer, show me where you go, show me what you do. I think those are important conversations to have as they're older. The little ones, it's a different question. So
now we have one more question left. So I just want to say to a Facebook Live, if anybody out there wants to send in a question, we only have a couple more minutes left. So send your questions in now. Now is the time. If not, we'll answer our last question that we have here, which is, what does self-care look like during a quarantine?
Oof. All right. Self-care is really important, and self-care has gotten a bad rap. And I know I've lectured too many times, but I'm going to just say this because I have to. So the notion of self-care actually comes from Al-Anon. I don't know if everybody knows that, but back when Al-Anon started, after AA was really full swing, people started talking about, how does one take care of oneself when you're codependent or when you're affected by someone else? And that grew and grew and grew as a phenomenon into what is now like a multi-billion-dollar self-care movement, which can be everything from, like, running to a spa to vacations and all that stuff. It's hard for parents, it's hard for working parents to have self-care on a good day. We're in a quarantine. I would say, find the things that satisfy you the most. I have worked with people, I'm talking to people now that are journaling, that are, all right, honest to God, I do this. I do karaoke and I record myself. I just go on the karaoke sites online and I do karaoke and then I send it to friends as a joke, right? That's my self-care. That's a thing I enjoy doing. Find something that makes you laugh. Find something that doesn't take a lot of time. Certainly, I said this before, meditation, exercise, eating, good foods and foods that you enjoy. This is not a time to be like, I suddenly need a diet, right? I mean, this is just a time to be like, let's really enjoy each other. Sometimes for parents of any age child, self-care really is me time. It's just having a moment alone and being able to breathe. And that may even mean just sitting down. Sometimes just sitting down is self-care. Journaling is a great thing. There are online journal prompts, or use a book, or use a computer, or use whatever works for you. And then also, I actually think daydreaming is not a bad form of self-care. Like, daydream about, where am I going to be in, like a couple of years? What vacation would I like next with my family? Like, maybe I just want a vacation alone. Maybe I want a vacation with friends or with my wife or, my husband or whomever. I think allowing yourself time to have compassion towards yourself and time to breathe is the best self-care you can probably do right now.
And another question actually came in, question about sleeping, advice for people having trouble sleeping. This person says, I can fall asleep, but then I wake up in the middle of the night and I can't fall back to sleep. Is there anything that you suggest?
Yes. Several things. First of all, and I don't know if I said this before when I was talking about apps, the Sleep With Me app is a really good app because I have used it myself. I really like this guy. He wants to be quote unquote your bore friend. So he is as boring as possible on purpose. Nothing he talks about is something you could listen to. The first time I listened to him, I'll never forget. I woke up also at 3 a.m. I was going through something. I woke up, I couldn't sleep. I stick in, like one earbud, put my head down, and he is reading an entire script with no affect of Star Trek. And he's just, and then Captain Kirk said, and it was like, oh my God. And I fell asleep. So first, apps. Second, please don't panic. The worst part about sleep is when we don't have it and we wake up and we panic. If you don't have them, I would highly recommend Epsom salts and taking Epsom salts bath, because magnesium is actually absorbed through the skin and it induces sleep. So that's a really good thing. There are all kinds of sleepy time teas, and there's golden milk and all the things that you can do that are sort of more supplemental and foods. And also, I am a really huge fan of CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It is not hard to learn. It is hard to do in that. And anybody who's interested, by the way, you can get my information. I will send you the protocol. But there are therapists who actually specialize in doing just this, but you can figure some pieces of this out on your own. You can shave back the time that you wake up. Like, don't go to bed until that time. If that's the time that, if you're not having trouble staying asleep, you can stay up the next night until 2 and then get in bed, and you'll probably fall asleep and sleep what is now a whole night, right? You'll not later than normal, but you'll sleep more, and you start to increase back towards the time you want to go to bed. The other thing is, take a look at what you're doing in bed. Sleep hygiene is super important. Do you have screens on yourself? Are you playing a game on your computer so you're stimulating your brain and you're not actually allowing your brain to get itself ready for bed? Are you eating super spicy foods? Do you have indigestion? Are you in a comfortable room? Is it cool and dark? Those are really important things for sleep. You want to bore yourself to sleep. You do not want to be sitting there playing, I admit it, Best Fiends, and saying one more. So when you wake up, just get out of bed. If you can't fall right back to sleep, get out of bed, go someplace else, sit down, meditate, or listen to that podcast, or read a book that's not super exciting, but don't read an algebra book unless you really love math. I would not enjoy an algebra book. But those are the things you can do with sleep. So, because it is tricky, but really panicking about it makes it a little worse. It does kind of make it worse. The other thing is, you should check yourself, because sometimes it's your sleep hygiene. Other times, sleep is more about anxiety or depression, and you should really kind of maybe even go online and take there's some really quick tests you can take. Am I depressed? Although you may know if you're depressed, because your sleep will be affected by that. And that's something, again, you would want to do something about, and getting better sleep by doing these other things would help. So I hope that answers your question.
Very helpful. That was great. So that wraps up all of our questions. I want to say thank you again to Dr. Hornstein for joining us tonight, and for everybody else on Facebook Live for joining us. Again, you can find Dr. Robin Hornstein at Robin Mindful Counseling on Instagram, and on her website, www.hptherapy.com. And of course, make sure to follow PFP on Facebook and Instagram at Philly Family Pride. And I want to let everyone know that we do plan on doing these chats more, so just make sure to follow us to find out more info. It was great talking to you tonight. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
You as well.